you guys are in, I would say, the toughest division in football. How do you work with your players to emphasize the competitiveness of the AFC North?
Yeah, I think our guys know what they're dealing with. I always tell the guys the only adjustment you're going to have to make in those is to your chin strap. Make it nice and tight because it's going to be one of those types of games.
Joining us today on NFL Spotlight, he has been the defensive coordinator of the Cincinnati Bengals since 2019, very well respected around the league, has been coaching for over 30 years in the NFL for over a decade, and he will be a head coach in this league at some point. It is Lou Anarumo. Lou, thanks for coming on. How are you?
Thanks a lot for having me. I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I have so much that I want to talk to you about. I mean, I just have to start with the very beginning of your coaching journey. First of all, you're a Staten Island guy. I'm from New York. Shout out Staten Island. But 1989 is when you started your coaching journey, and you're a part-time coach at Wagner as a running backs coach. I'm curious just to know, how did you begin your coaching journey, and how was it on the offensive side? And I guess what changed and led you eventually to defense?
Yeah, it's funny how it all happened. I started, as you just mentioned, at Wagner. I was going to school and just I knew I wanted to coach, and I was able to, they had a spring game, I think, over in Europe, and I was able to just help out for those spring practices that they usually wouldn't have, and they had an opening there at running back, so I helped out. And then it was funny the way it happened, because I get a call. It's fast forward to let's say middle of July that particular summer, or the next summer, 1990, I am I don't remember. I was somewhere in Staten Island, probably eating pizza or something, but I get a phone call to the house, and it was Syracuse, and I had applied to be a GA there, and last minute something happened with the guy that actually took the job in front of me, and he didn't end up going, and there was a spot open up late, and they're like, hey, you want to come up? And I was like, do I have to interview? No, it's your job, one of those. So, well, the job happened to be on defense. So kind of the rest is history from there, to be quite honest with you. So that's how it started, really, to get into the defensive side of the ball.
It's so fascinating how sometimes this stuff just falls in place, and all of a sudden here you are, you're off and running. And I want to go through a couple of other spots that you were at, but just looking at everything from a whole, when I was looking at it, do you ever just look back at how you really coached at kind of all levels with Wagner, Syracuse, Marshall, Purdue, Harvard, and you did that? And I know some younger coaches in the league and guys who show up to the combine and want to get into coaching, like, you feel like you really took it the way it's supposed to be done and didn't do it with any shortcuts. Do you ever look back at that journey and how you did it?
Yeah, I think, to me, obviously, since it's my path and how I did it, you learn so many things. You learn really more what not to do than what to do as you progress through your coaching career, through all the different levels. And, as you mentioned, from all the way in Division III to 1AA to, lower kind of 1A football, to Big Ten, to to the NFL. So my journey was one that had a lot of twists and turns, but I certainly knew where I wanted to end up. And I always took time while I was in college, to go visit pro teams and pro staff, so I got to know people, number one, and kind of stayed up with the trends along the way, so that it wasn't a total shock when I got to the league on kind of what was happening, what was going on.
Yep, it's a very big relationship business, and we'll get to when you broke into the NFL in a second. But I do want to ask you just about that period from 92 to 94 at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. Could you just talk about that, how different it is, and the type of people you're coaching? Because that is extremely unique compared to, I guess, every other job that you've had.
Yeah, it was great. It was my first, full-time job, as they say. Charlie Pravada was the head coach back then, and is a good friend today. I was the defensive coordinator right away coming from a graduate assistant. So, it was a lot of my plate as a young coach. But those guys there, those guys that go through that school, are unbelievable what they're asked to do. They go out to sea for the better part of their college years, and so they would have to go to and work out on the ships that they were on, so that when they came back for football season, they were, at least in somewhat good shape. We never saw them once they left, for the spring. So it was very, very unique. You had to deal with the plebes, the freshmen, where they had to go through the regiment of that training. They got there like right after 4th of July, and they're squaring corners and getting up at the crack of dawn. And then, oh, by the way, they got football practice, a few weeks later. So, and a very, very difficult, one of the better engineering schools in the country. So you talk about a lot on their plates. Those guys were able to handle an awful lot. And, we were very successful there while I was there. And, it's a tribute to what those guys can do, both mentally and physically, what they can handle.
That's absolutely incredible. Before I mentioned like the relationships that you grow in this industry, correct me if I'm wrong, but Joe Philbin was also there with you. And if I'm not mistaken, your first NFL job was in Miami and it came from Joe. Was the NFL always a goal for you? And how did that opportunity in Miami come up? Was it actually Joe?
Yeah, so two guys. I would say first in my mind, I always, okay, when I was at a graduate assistant, then I'm at Kings Point, Merchant Marine Academy. Hey, I'd love to be a Division I football coach someday. That would be unbelievable. Well, then again, as you start to climb, I had bigger visions of bigger goals of then getting to the NFL. And Joe and I worked at two places actually. Joe worked that was the first time I met Joe, was at Merchant Marine, and then we were also on the same staff at Harvard. So we got to know each other, stayed in touch, and the former defensive coordinator when I was at Miami at the time, Kevin Coyle, also worked at Kings Point before me, for the previous head coach. So I had connection with Kevin and certainly Joe, so that when they both got to Miami, I was fortunate enough to go there and get my first chance.
So was the NFL like always a goal for you, or was that just because Joe happened to be there and you got that goal? Or like, was there a point where you're like, I want to be in the big leagues, I want to be in football, and this was the opportunity now?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, I think early on it probably was, let's get a great Division I job. Uh, I would say by the time I got to Harvard, I started thinking bigger than that, and really started locking in on trying to get myself to the NFL. However, however long it took, I knew, I would, get a chance to be there, and it would be great. So I'm fortunate that it worked out.
There's like this very famous graphic that people put up on broadcast whenever it's the Washington Commanders coaching staff back in the day. There's Kyle Shanahan and there's Sean McVay and there's Mike McDaniel and there's Raheem Morris and that staff that they once had. The Miami Dolphins coaching staff is not talked about a lot either. I mean, because they
Yeah.
belong in that category, I would say. Do you ever look back at that coaching staff? I see Zach Taylor, Dan Campbell, Darren Rizzi, who was on this show, Dave Phipp, Ben Johnson, yourself. I mean, that coaching staff had some pretty big names there.
It's unbelievable. We go back all the time, Zach and I, and we talk about, just all the guys that left there, and then Joe Shane is obviously the GM of the Giants right now. Joe was there with us. I got to know Joe very well there. So it was a great staff. Casey Rogers, who's also been a coordinator in this league for a long time. Obviously, Todd Bowles. Todd wasn't on that staff, but he had just left just before we got there. So, just a great group of guys, and it really is amazing. I can remember when, going to see Ben and Zach and just talking ball all the way back then. Yeah, it was great. Great group of guys.
There was a point there after I think Joe got fired where you were the interim defensive coordinator, Dan was the interim head coach, and Zach was the offensive coordinator, which thinking about it now in 2024, it's a crazy thing to think about, of course, with the success both of you have had in Cincinnati and the success that Dan is having right now in Detroit. What do you remember just about that Bengals defensive coordinator search in 2019? Because what I recall from it, that search took longer than expected. I think they hired you in February. What do you remember about that search when you finally got that job from Zach?
Yeah, well, I know that Zach and I have been friends, ever since the Miami days, and when the opportunity came about, I flew out here, and it was like we had never left each other in terms of how we wanted to, build the team and how we wanted to shape the roster. And his beliefs are the same as my beliefs. So it was a situation that I certainly couldn't pass up, and certainly doing it with Zach, a guy I love and trust. And we are like-minded in so many ways. It was a great opportunity.
I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about this. Before you took that Bengals job, you had 1 year with the Giants as the defensive backs coach. Just for you being a Staten Island guy, what was that like being with the hometown team? I'm not sure. Did you grow up a Giants fan? Was that your team? What was that like to be a coach with that team, that organization, and that history?
It was unbelievable. I was definitely a Giant fan growing up, and Lawrence Taylor, Phil Simms, that whole crew, the Super Bowls. I was a huge Giant fan, and I remember going to the games when I was young, sitting up in the 300 levels, and they weren't very good at the time, and they got better as years went on. In the early '80s, then when Coach Parcells took over, certainly all the success, and so to walk into that building, even though it was not long, it was only a year. Man, that was a great thrill for me to be a part of that place. And I know a whole lot of ticket requests that year.
Oh, I could imagine. I could imagine. So it ended up being just 1 year because you ended up, of course, getting that job with the Bengals. Finally, now you are a defensive coordinator in the NFL. But one of the things that I think people don't realize, and I don't know how soon you kind of got involved with all this, but the Bengals have the smallest personnel department in the league, which means everyone has more on their plates and it involves various aspects of the football operation. And that includes coaches. What is that like for you? And do you feel like there's a benefit for you to be able to be so involved in that side as well?
Yeah, I think we do an outstanding job here, Duke Tobin and his crew of guys, and how much we're involved. You get to see the ins and outs of everything, every aspect of how we go about picking our players, how we go about how we're going to budget this and budget that, and just the process of going out. We certainly go out on the road and scouting and things, but being a big part of the decision making when it comes down to exactly who we're going to draft, who we're going to sign in free agency. I'm in direct line with the guys upstairs, and hey, we like this guy, we don't like that guy, and it is certainly a unique thing in that way, but it works for us and it's worked here, and it's really broadened my horizons so much when it comes to that part of it, and I know it's going to help me as I go down the road with future opportunities.
Have you like spoken to like other coordinators in the NFL who you do hear from them that what you do and the stuff on your plate is far different than them?
Sometimes, it's not a ton of guys. I certainly have a lot of friends that we talk to, but we kind of keep our stuff in house when it comes to the business part of it. But certainly sharing stuff at the combine and things like that about different ways to play teams, we do that. But kind of the ins and outs of our spot, we kind of keep it to myself.
All right. I do believe, though, the stuff that you guys do definitely helps down the road whenever that time does come. Let me just ask you a couple of things here about the Bengals. Obviously, that first year, there was no Joe Burrow, but eventually he shows up. Ja'Marr Chase shows up. T. Higgins shows up. As a defensive coordinator, what is it like when you get to practice against guys like that on the offensive side? And how much does it help for you guys when it comes to preparing versus other teams who might not be as explosive as those guys?
Well, yeah, it's fantastic. It helps. It helps the whole team. It helps certainly our defensive players. The guys that got to try to cover Jamar and T, and Tyler Boyd, who's not with us any longer, but when we first got here, and then dealing with Joe and what he sees and his accuracy and the way he approaches the game. It is a great give and take, and I think that we do a good job here in Zach of sharing information amongst each other. It's never offense against defense. It's the Bengals trying to get better and win games. And, I'll go over to Joe and say, hey, what did you see there on this particular play in practice? If it was a good snap for us, and vice versa. If he hits us for a big play, I want to know why. What did you see? Why did you throw the ball there? How did you know the blitz was coming? So it's constant back and forth with that part of it with Joe. And then again, our DBs in particular, knowing, hey, these are a couple of the premier receivers that you're going to face in the league, what you can and can't do, and how it all ties in with playing good defense when you're playing elite offenses like that.
So one of the things about the Bengals is that you guys are in, I would say, the toughest division in football. And last year, to go 9-8, have a winning record, obviously Joe was injured, but that is still last place in the division. Like, how do you work with your players to emphasize the competitiveness of the AFC North and how it kind of differs from any other division in football?
Yeah, I think our guys know what they're dealing with when they come through the door every day to go to work. It is, in our opinion, the most competitive, the toughest division in the NFL. There's never been a three-time champion. We won it a couple years in a row. There's been a bunch of teams that have run it twice in a row, but nobody's ever won it 3 times. So, you look at other divisions and there's teams that have won it consistently for a long time. But so the balance in the league in our division is something else. And we know the 6 games we're going to play against those teams are going to be, right down to the wire every game. And, I always tell the guys the only adjustment you're going to have to make in those is to your chin strap. Make it nice and tight because it's going to be one of those type of games. So.
All right, guys, it is the best time of year. Football is back, and we're talking NFL Sundays, college football Saturdays, and that glorious grind of fantasy football lineups. This is where your inner GM comes alive, setting the perfect fantasy roster, screaming at your TV, and making last-minute waiver moves that either make you a hero or make you the guy that everyone ridiculed in your group chat.
But listen, while you're over here making sure your fantasy team is dialed in, don't let your personal grooming become the guy that gets left on the bench. Let's be honest, nobody wants to fumble their grooming routine, but that's where Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra comes in, acting as your all-in-one grooming playbook. From keeping things sharp down below with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, to taking care of those rogue nose and ear hairs with the Weed Whacker 2.0. This is the lineup that'll keep you looking and feeling like a champ on and off the field. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra doesn't even stop at grooming essentials. It also comes with 2 free gifts: the Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo and the Shed 2.0 Toiletry Bag. Premium gear to ensure that you're always ready for action, whether at home or on the road. And listen, guys, I've been there, hesitant to do some cleanup for fear of razor burner nicks, but Manscaped has you covered, easing those worries with their high-quality products. They're effective, and it's no joke.
Join the over 11 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get ready for kickoff by heading over to manscaped.com. Use the code ARI, A-R-I, for 20% off plus free shipping. Trust me, you will be drafting the real MVP of grooming this season. I want to ask you just about one particular player on your team. Trey Hendrickson has been one of the most underrated and underappreciated pass rushers in this league. I mean, how important is he for your defense, and why do you think he isn't talked about much nationally? Like, no one brings up his name with all the other elite guys.
Yeah, I really don't know. He certainly deserves all of the accolades to be talked about, and certainly one of the elite rushers in our league. 17 sacks last year, and there's only been a handful of guys in league history to do that. He's a pass rushing guy who plays with great effort, great energy. We are not the same defense without him, and the offense has to do certain things to make sure he's handled, because he can be a problem. Not only does he get the quarterback sacked, but he does a great job of creating takeaways and fumbles, sack fumbles, and things like that. So he's a premier player for us. We feel like he's one of the premier players in the league. And I think that if you'd ask the other coaches, I think that they would agree.
As somebody who covers free agency and the entire league very closely, I remember when the Bengals signed him and there was a lot of talk about overpay. And of course, he has proven that to be completely not true, probably underpaid right now in the NFL. All right. In the intro, I mentioned that you will be a head coach in this league eventually. I'm a true believer in that. There was a stretch where a lot of teams were looking for the young offensive mind. But then this past offseason, there were a bunch of defensive minded guys who got head coaching jobs. I think it was 5 or 6 people. Does that give you a little bit more hope that you will get your own shot here very soon?
Yeah, I think I think it's different every year, as you mentioned. The cycle goes in different ways, but I think ultimately organizations are looking for the best guy for their team. I certainly feel like at some point I would fit that bill for one of the organizations, but we got to take care of business here first and make sure we do a great job here. And we have a great football team this year, and I'm really looking forward to getting this thing started. Training camp has gone well for us so far. Knock on wood, we've been healthy, and looking forward to that, continuing that.
All right, last couple of things here. I mentioned before your path to getting to this point. We go to the NFL Combine every year. There are a lot of young coaches out there who are trying to get their foot in the door. What is like your piece of advice for those guys who are trying to get into the league or just get into coaching? What is the one thing you try to tell them?
Yeah, I think that it's so important to do some of the things that I did. You're going to get your job, whatever job you're at, and then if you want to be a college coach, then go to the best college and visit those people and get to know them and find out what they're doing, and or multiple schools. If you want to be a pro coach like I did, go visit, get to know the coaches, because generally speaking, most teams are open to that. It's everybody wants instant gratification. I want to be a pro coach and blink your eyes and you're there. But this is a tough league. But I would just say just keep doing what you're doing, stay in it. But don't stop reaching for your goals. But also go visit, like I said, go visit people, reach out to different people that you don't know, and really you never know who can help you down the road.
Yeah, there are just so many stories of people doing that. People who started, whether it's in the college game, if it's the NFL, you're starting as a quality control guy, which is not a fun job, but that's where you start and eventually you work your way up the ladder. All right, last question. I ask this to everyone who shows up on the NFL Spotlight Show. This is a show. We put you in the spotlight for the amazing work that you've done. Lou, is there anybody else that you know who you believe deserves to be sitting in this seat here in the future?
I do. I'm glad you asked me early because I would be mad at myself if I didn't say this name. So he's a really good friend of mine. We've coached together in college and in the NFL. To me, he's one of the better defensive line coaches in the league. His name is Terrell Williams, and Terrell is the current D-line coach at the Detroit Lions. He's been at Tennessee for a long time, but T and I have been together forever, and I think the world of him. He's a hell of a coach.
I love it. I'm well aware of who Terrell Williams is. And this show, we've been trying to get a few defensive line coaches, offensive line coaches, those guys in particular. No one really talks about them, but a lot of guys in this league, including Terrell, do tremendous work. And we will definitely look into getting him here on the NFL Spotlight Show. All right, Lou, I want to thank you for coming on, talking about your journey, your team this season, some of the rivalries, your players, and much success here in the 2024 NFL season, and best of luck going into this year.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys having me, and it was great. Talk soon.
Special thanks to Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo for joining us here on this week's NFL Spotlight Show. Like we talked about in the episode, Lou has done it the right way when it comes to going through the coaching ranks, going from Wagner, Syracuse, U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, Harvard, Marshall, Purdue, and then eventually the NFL with the Dolphins, Giants, and then eventually getting the Bengals job in 2019, a job that he was not on the initial short list. I remember they had Jack Del Rio they were looking at. They were looking at a bunch of other guys, eventually found Lou Anarumo, and Zach Taylor probably has not made a better hire than him. And like I said in the interview, I do believe he will be a head coach in this league. Eventually, you listen to people like Bill Belichick and other very respected people in this league who talk about his scheme, how confusing it is, especially for younger quarterbacks in this league. He has done it for many years. Of course, this last coaching cycle, many defensive-minded guys got head coaching jobs. I think that bodes well for Lou Anarumo.